This is Books for Breakfast, a podcast where we talk about books and writing. I'm Enda Wiley.
And I'm Peter Sir.
And you're all very welcome to this morning's show.
And on today's show, we're going to be talking to Karin-Lin whose short story collection, Faulty Predictions, won the Flannery O'Connor Award for short fiction. But we're actually going to be talking to her about her debut novel, You Are Here, about the residents of a small upstate New York town who have to grapple with the impending closure of a once bustling shopping mall. An engrossing, character-driven story. A story about our ties to and interactions with others. You Are Here is a book about regular people, a beautifully written and radically sympathetic novel, a breathtaking depiction of a community. That's just some of the praise this book has won. But Enda, you wanted to talk to us about something else first, didn't you?
Well, Peter, I thought we'd just mention while we're here another exciting festival that's coming up. Compelling voices, unforgettable stories and exciting performances are going to be part of the International Literature Festival Dublin 2025, which is running from May the 16th to the 25th in Merrion Square Park. And Henrietta McCurvey, I was talking to her the other day and she was really excited about the events that she's programming for that festival. There's going to be, can you imagine, more than 200 events across fiction, non-fiction, poetry, film, music, performance. It's going to be a mixture of global and Irish voices. It's going to be people like Rebecca Solnit, Roxanne Gay, David Park, Owen Colfer, Emer McBride, Kit Dewall. Oh my gosh, there's so many events taking place. I'm really looking forward to it. Peter, what events are you looking forward to?
Well, there's lots of things, because I always like this festival kind of sitting. They're all in tents, by the way, and big load of tents in Merrion Square. So I kind of like the whole kind of festive nature of it. So anyway, leading voices include historian Avi Shalem with a provocative examination of Israel's policy towards Palestine. So that is going to be very interesting. Ukrainian Harvard professor Cyril Plucky is going to recount the chaos and disaster at Ukraine's nuclear plant from the first day of Russia's full-scale invasion back in 2022. Veteran US-UK journalist Stephanie Baker is going to be delving into the high-stakes economic warfare against Russia. And US-Irish cultural critic Rebecca Solnit is going to be sharing insights from No Straight Road Takes You There, reflecting on climate change, power and collective resistance. Also Roxanne Gay, who is the trailblazing US writer and cultural critic. She's going to come back to ILFD with Opinions, a collection of her most powerful non-fictions written over the last decade.
My gosh, it's really going to be a great festival. And of course, the full programme and tickets are available from International Literature Dublin Festival. It's a Dublin City Council funded initiative, and it does also receive support from the Arts Council, we have to say, because obviously festivals like this really need support. But there's going to be international authors as well. There's going to be a whole rake of people like Agustín Fernández Malo from Spain, discussing the Book of All Loves with Irish novelist Ronan Hession. There's going to be Vincenzo Latronico from Italy. He's going to talk about perfection. That sounds really interesting. Shortlisted for the 2025 International Booker Prize with Nisha Dolan. There's going to be a rake of comic book fans are in for a big treat with appearances from Neil Cameron, creator of Donut Squad, and Aoife Dooley. There's going to be the brilliant mind behind Frankie's World and Squid Squad, alongside legendary illustrators from the Beano and the Marvel artist Will Sliney. There's going to be a host of Irish language events. You'll be interested in that, Peter, featuring artists like Kieran A, Magella Nigonal and Roxana Nick Liam. So the Fringe Festival, I want to mention that as well, that the Fringe programme, part of this festival, features walking tours. There's going to be lunchtime yoga, journaling, drawing sessions, slam poetry, trad sessions. It's going to be really great. So I suppose, Peter, we're just saying do go along, aren't we, from May the 16th to the 25th.
Yeah, but also you're also doing an event there, and isn't that right?
Oh, completely forgot. Actually, yeah. I am going to have the pleasure of being in conversation with debut novelists Patrick Holloway for his book, The Language of Remembering, and also Gethin Dick, who's written a really interesting first novel as well. It's published by Tramp Press, called Water in the Desert, Fire in the Night. As I said, published by Tramp Press. Patrick Holloway's book is published by Epoch Press, and I'm doing that event from 1 o'clock to 2 p.m. on May the 17th, again in the tent. I cannot wait to get into that tent, Peter. It's going to be really exciting.
Great stuff. And now to Karin-Lin-Greenberg.
Jackson Huang's mother arranged for the school bus to drop him off outside the mall every weekday afternoon because she works at the salon until 9. After he finishes his homework, which he does sitting in one of the stylist chairs with a book balanced on his lap, he helps his mother. He sweeps the hair that falls around her chair. He also sweeps the entire salon from one end to the other because hairs swirl in the breeze created by the air conditioning and heat. When someone walks quickly through the salon, they stir up the hairs on the floor, which then land all over the place, and this leaves Jackson more to sweep too. A year ago, the salon was more fun because there were other stylists working there, and Jackson could talk to them when they weren't busy. There was Irma with her bright orange hair piled high on her head, her dangly earrings, her loud laugh that filled the entire space. There was Missy, who was young with a small diamond stud in her nose and saw every single movie shown in the mall's theater. There was Jack with his snakeskin boots, who would tease Jackson, saying he was named after him, even though Jackson knows he was named after Michael Jackson, who was his mother's favorite singer when she was growing up, and because he was born on the same day in 2009, Michael Jackson died. But they are all gone, off to salons where business is better, and there is a row of empty chairs now. Jackson's mother is the only stylist left. Today, Belinda, who manages the salon, is here. She pops in a few times a month to see how things are going, but she doesn't cut hair anymore. She used to, but now the arthritis in her hands is too painful. Jackson's mother rents her chair from Belinda, who walks with a limp and wears long flowered shirts and sighs a lot. Jackson's mother dyes Belinda's hair the color of eggplants. Belinda is always saying she's not sure how long the salon can stay open. There's rumors the whole mall will be shutting down soon, Belinda says, sitting in the chair next to Jackson's mother's station. Jackson is sweeping and pretending not to listen, but he always listens to everything people say to his mother. He's very good at what she calls multitasking. He can sweep and eavesdrop. He can do math homework and eavesdrop. He can fold towels and eavesdrop. Eavesdropping is one of his top skills. They've been saying that for years, says Jackson's mom. I'll believe it when they turn out the lights and lock the doors. Belinda points to a bucket in the hallway next to a yellow sign that says wet floor and features a silhouette of a man slipping. Water from the leaky roof has been dripping into the bucket for the past week. They've stopped fixing things, Tina.
And that was writer Karin-Lin-Greenberg reading a section, The Sweeper of Hair, from her novel You Are Here, published by Counterpoint, Berkeley, California. It's a novel about a dying suburban mall in upstate New York and the diverse range of people whose lives randomly connect as the novel progresses. A mall. Well, this may sound like a dull, banal premise for a novel, but far from it. It's a really charming and witty novel that exposes with grace and intelligence the complexity of ordinary people's lives as neighbours and hardworking people within the mall.
Karin-Lin-Greenberg is a Chinese-American writer. She's written 2 award-winning collections of stories, Faulty Predictions, which won the Flannery O'Connor Award for short fiction, and Vanished, which won the Prairie Schooner Raz Schumacher Book Prize in fiction. She's an associate professor in the English department at Siena College in upstate New York. So we're very happy to have Karen at the Books for Breakfast table this morning.
We are indeed very happy. And I love that bit about eavesdropping as well, Karen, because that made me think that's just what writers do. They love to eavesdrop. Well, you've written very well-received short story collections as well. And this first novel of yours started from a short story called The Sweeper of Hair, which became the first chapter, which you've just read from there, of the novel. Did you always want to write a novel, or was there a moment in this short story, it was originally published in the Chicago Tribune, wasn't it, when you thought, oh, you know, this might just expand, it might develop, it might become a novel, and it might become a first novel at that?
Yeah, so I wrote it initially as a short story, a standalone short story, and didn't think anything more would come of it. And I had been working on a novel. I have several, I guess you could call them failed novels that worked on and just couldn't really bring them to conclusion. And I started thinking maybe I'm just a short story writer who cannot execute, a 300-page novel. But I was, working on another novel that I was sort of stalling on. And then this was published in the Chicago Tribune, and it had a wider readership than a lot of all of the stories that I'd published, which are, in literary journals that, writers read. But I think people who aren't wouldn't necessarily pick them up. And, I got some emails from people who read it, and I thought, wow, that's kind of exciting. It gave me some confidence about this. And then I thought about the place, the mall, and the impending closure, and how it
Yeah,
could
that's really
impact
interesting.
a lot of people and not just the characters who are in this story. So the novel emerged from that place and just who else might inhabit it, who else might be impacted by the closing. So it was it didn't start as a novel, but it ended up being a novel because I kept wanting to explore. Yeah.
It's kind of like the mall is such an iconic place. Like in our imagination of America, we always think, oh, there's the mall and the mall rats, and everybody's going to the mall. I mean, we don't really have, because we don't. It's not something we really have. We do have what we call shopping centers, but certainly not malls as such, as a kind of social place where people interact and meet. You might meet in a bar or a pub or on the streets, but again, I suppose what drew you to the idea of a dying mall as a place to set a novel? And have you always been interested in malls and I suppose the novelistic potential of malls?
I'm interested in setting and how setting shapes character and setting shapes how people behave. And the time I was writing the novel, which is in 2018 to 2019, I was just seeing a lot of these places just near me, just across America, just shutting down because of, really at that point, because of e-commerce, because a lot of people could shop from their computers and they didn't have to go to the mall. And then what happened once it was written, the first draft was 2018 to 2019. I didn't know about the pandemic at that point. But then in 2020, when I was revising it, the pandemic happened and people couldn't go to malls. And then since then, more and more malls have been shutting down. So it wasn't necessarily that I have a particular interest in malls, but I am interested in places, and also when places change, how do the people who inhabit them change, or how does that affect them? So for me, the idea of setting feels pretty fertile when I'm thinking about plot and how plot could be shaped by interactions with place.
Yeah. And Peter and I live in the centre of Dublin. And this novel of yours was a really fascinating portrayal of contemporary suburban America to us. The novel rotates between 5 different characters wrapped up in their various thoughts and dreams. And at first glance, it seemed to me that their lives were so mundane. But then, as the novel evolves, beneath their outer, ordinary lives, you begin to realise that each of them possesses their own aspirations and their own dreams. I'm thinking, for instance, of Tina, the mall's hairstylist, who's watching YouTube art tutorials on the side, and her son Jackson, he's dreaming of becoming a famous musician, and then he enlists Maria, a teenage cashier at the mall, to help him with his magic routines, and it's kind of like a domino effect, and she's also harbouring hopes to become an actress, and it goes on and on. So really, that idea that under the ordinary life there bubbles aspirations and hopes and dreams, doesn't there, Karen?
Yeah, that was something I was thinking about a lot, and just this idea that this is one of the things that fiction can do. It can see inside of the characters, because I always think about just the people. I might be sitting in a meeting and I just look around and just wonder what are all these people thinking? What's going on?
Yeah.
Where would they rather be? And so I think that for me is the most fun thing about writing fiction. It's taking these characters who, exactly as you said, are ordinary. There's nothing, extraordinary about any of them. They're just people who are, going to their jobs, going to school, just trying to get through the day. And there's more going on with all of them. And oftentimes from the outside, you have no idea. You don't see it. And so that was the exploration. And the exploration was also, for me, what I liked about working with 5 different point of view characters was that we could see even the people who are in their orbit don't know what's happening in their minds. There's a mother and son who are mentioned in the excerpt that I read, and they both have secrets from each other. And they're not, deep, dark secrets, but they're, as you said, Tina wants to be an artist, her son wants to be a magician, and they're just not telling each other yet because they both think they're not good enough to reveal it. So for me, that was really fun to explore in this novel.
Yeah. Yeah.
What's interesting as well is that these are people who wouldn't normally interact if it weren't for the mall. I mean, so like Ro, for instance, wouldn't normally socialize with Tina, but only does so because she's getting her hair cut by her for years. Isn't that right? And then that connection that people have in the novel with people they wouldn't normally connect with outside of that, maybe, and also the assumptions that we make about people make this a kind of a complex read, I think, in a way.
Well, thank you. Yeah, that was my hope too. How do you what's a space where people can interact that would not come across each other in their daily lives? And this is also something that was appealing to me about malls, and I think something that's sad about dying malls in America because we don't have these spaces. I think, that term third space, a place that isn't your home, it isn't your work, another place you go to. I think, most of them are places you either go to, maybe a coffee shop to just, do something on your laptop or with people right? If you go to a bar or a pub. And so this place was particularly appealing because these characters who wouldn't interact with each other were able to, and maybe break down some of the ideas that the preconceived notions they had about each other. So I think, I just started with the idea of this space, but then as I was writing the chapters, I kept thinking, what are the potentials for this space? What might happen here that couldn't happen anywhere else? So yeah, I was particularly drawn to it, and more so as I kept writing and thinking about both good and bad things that could happen in this space.
Yeah, and I love the way it kind of circled back, but you were always seeing it through a different perspective sometimes. Like you were in the mind of somebody, but then you were seeing what a neighbour or somebody in the mall thought about them. So you're getting it from lots of different angles. So it was very good. I enjoyed it for that reason. But Karen, we interviewed the American poet Kelly Michaels. She lives here in Dublin, about her collection of poetry, American Anthem, recently. And they are poems that deal with gun violence and massacres in the States. And your novel, beneath the theme of the mundanity of lives, also addresses the issue of gun violence, and in this case in a dying mall. And I was just wondering, could you talk a little bit about how these two very different themes, how you intertwined them in the novel? And also, I read somewhere that you said that when you were writing it, only these kind of things could happen to novelists. A real life shooting actually happened in your local mall. Were you thinking about all this, and then, or did the shooting inspire it? Or
Yeah, so I didn't have this whole novel planned out as I was
yeah,
writing it. It was just this idea of what might happen in this space. And as you said, unfortunately, when you're thinking about contemporary America and you're thinking about large public spaces, this becomes something that pops into your mind. I think it's something that unfortunately it was devastating as I was the years I spent revising it. There were, mass shooting after mass shooting, and I just thought this is so terrible that, that this is constantly in the news. At, again, ordinary places. There was one at a grocery store that was horrific. And again, a grocery store, it's just a place you go and you need to go to, right? And so yeah, I was thinking just about that question of what could happen in this space, and as Peter said, it's a place where characters can interact, right? So that there's the positives of this, characters who don't know each other, but there's also these problematic things that could happen in these large public spaces. And yeah, and you're right. There at our local mall, there was a shooting, and it was fortunately nobody was injured. Somebody shot into the ceiling, but I teach, and some of my students were there. It was on a Saturday, and they heard it, and they came to school the next week and said, we just can't do our work. We're really rattled. And it wasn't them trying to get out of work. It was that you're in this place and you're not necessarily injured, but you just hear that sound, you hear people panicking. And so that was the question for me for the second half of the book. How are people affected? What are the ripple effects? Even if you aren't necessarily the one, who takes the bullet or who is injured or who even sees it. And so that became a really compelling question to work through for me.
yeah, it added another kind of complex layer to the novel, which I think was important. It strengthened the novel, I thought.
I wondered, I mean, Jose Saramago in his novel The Cave, or the English writer Kate Atkinson in her novel Started Early, Took My Dog, or J.G. Ballard, his last book Kingdom Come, they all use malls as places of interest in their novels. And I just wondered, did you look to any kind of other novels with malls in them for inspiration at all?
I didn't. I didn't think about malls specifically. I was thinking when I started writing this, I was thinking this would be a novel in stories, and then ended up in revision It's maybe halfway between a novel and stories and a novel, but I was looking at books that were novels and stories and that were about communities. I think the word community was in my head more than malls. So I was thinking a lot about Olive Kitteridge by Elizabeth Strout and Olive Again, and about the community in Maine and the characters that, intersect. And even back to a book like Winesburg, Ohio, which is about, a town and the people who live in the town. So no, I didn't look specifically at malls. I think maybe not wanting to be kind of too influenced, but for sure thinking about if you're telling a variety of stories that intersect in a particular place, how might you depict this community? And that's why I initially thought this idea of a novel and stories would be the form that this would go in.
Because it is written in sections like short stories, and yet it is a novel. It is a novel, isn't it? But I definitely think that it must have helped you starting out as a short story writer, because it helped it expand then, didn't it?
That was the way I managed to write it. I think I just told myself in
Yeah.
my head, these are stories, you can do this, you've done this before. And then,
Yeah.
figuring out later on with, my agents, with my editor, how to maybe strengthen the connections and to also feel like each chapter didn't have to come to a necessary conclusion, and you could
Yeah,
leave some
exactly.
questions for the next chapter to answer, which was a little bit hard for me, I think, as somebody who came from writing short stories. But I think in the revision,
Yeah.
hopefully it became a little bit closer to novel than story collection.
Very visual as well. I could imagine it being on screen,
Yeah.
so you never know, Karen. But you spoke there about communities. You used the word communities. And I thought it was very much a novel about that, about the strength of communities and how they can impact on our dreams and aspirations. And we spoke about the gun culture in America. But I think in this novel, it's a very empathetic novel as well. And there are moments of care and kindness in the novel that make it an uplifting read. Do you see it as a novel of hope?
Think so. I hope so. The very last chapter, if it's a chapter and epilogue, I'm not sure. It I I really debated over that. That's a chapter that shows where the characters are about 10 years in the future, and
Yeah.
I wanted it to be sort of, these characters have gone through some difficult things, but they found paths forward. And I really struggled with it because I wanted it to be hopeful but not perfect. And
Yeah.
that's a chapter that, a lot of readers have asked about or have critiqued and said, "I don't need it," and you probably don't need it. It probably could have ended before.
Yeah.
But yeah, I wanted to end on a moment of hope, a image of hope for these characters, and it was trying to figure out how to balance that without getting too sentimental. So
Yeah.
yeah, I think
Yeah.
I my goal was for it to be hopeful, to show these characters who have dreams, who try to pursue them. Some work, some don't. But yeah, that was my goal.
I actually really enjoyed him.
You know, I, Jackson is the character that I come to three times. He gets that epilogue chapter. So I think just maybe wanting to spend a little bit more time with him maybe tells me that he's my favorite. I could say that Kevin was the most difficult character for me to write because I think he's thank you. I think he's the character that's most different from me. None of them are autobiographical, but he's the one who I just really struggled to figure out, like, what makes him tick, like what makes him, how does he think this way? And so he was the most challenging of all of them.
And of course, there's Ro as well, who's a difficult character, but at times you feel that that she's lonely as well. And she doesn't mean to
Right.
say the things that she says, and people can see. So it's interesting to see people from different people's perspectives, as we said. No, I did enjoy watching Kevin because maybe a bit like you, I was wondering, well, what's he about,
Right.
because he's
Yeah.
struggling, isn't he, to drag out his English PhD, and he works in a bookshop, and he's got all these quirky business ideas, doesn't he, with dogs and things.
Yeah.
I could quite
Right.
enjoy
Right.
that. But anyway, Karen, I'd like to say thank you so much for coming in today, all the way from across the Atlantic to join us at the breakfast table. It's been wonderful to talk to you about your novel, You Are Here, among other things, an Oprah Daily Best Book. So well done, Karen, and thank you so much for coming in.
Thank you. And thank you both for having me and for talking to me about You Are Here.
I think we've reached the end of our Books for Breakfast podcast this morning. I'm definitely rushing off to have more coffee. And I'm Enda Wiley, and I have Peter Sarah here with me. And Peter, would you like to tell everyone about the details of the podcast if they'd like to listen again?
Well, you can subscribe at all the usual sources, Google and Apple and so on. And if you want to check out the notes that go along with this podcast, you can go to booksforbreakfast.buzzsprout.com. And yeah, so
we'll be back again. We'll have the toast on, we'll have the kettle boiling, we will have more books to discuss, and we're looking forward to having you here. So goodbye, everybody.
Goodbye.